ready to roll. Okay, so operations with complex numbers. Okay, first thing that I want to tell you, actually I'm on the part where it says complex numbers and their roots. First thing I want to tell you is they lied. People that have taught you math in previous years have lied to you for a number of years. And here's how they lied. They told you that you cannot take the square root of a negative number. They told you that. And it is true that there isn't a real root of a negative number. However, if you take the square root of -1, you get an imaginary number I. Okay? So they lied in telling you that you can't do it. You can. It's just that you don't produce a real number. You produce what's called an imaginary number. Okay, so if I take the square root of -1, I get I. Okay? But there's something that you kind of need to keep track of too. I to the first would just be equal to I. But if I squared I, well, square root of -1 is I, right? If I square both sides of this, I squared would be equal to -1. I to the third is equal to I to the second times I, which would be -1 times I, which would be -I. And I to the fourth is equal to I squared times I squared, which is equal to -1 times -1, which is equal to 1. Now, seeing this, there's kind of a pattern that develops. I to the fifth is equal to I to the fourth times I, which would be 1 times I, which is I. I to the sixth is equal to I to the fourth times I squared, which is 1 times -1, which is equal to -1. I to the seventh equals I to the fourth times I to the third. Okay, we know I to the fourth is 1. I to the third is -I. So that would be -I. And I to the eighth equals I to the fourth times I to the fourth. I to the fourth is 1, so 1 times 1, which is equal to 1. So you can see that I'm going I, -1, -I, 1. I, -1, -I, 1. So I can follow that same pattern. I to the ninth, well, I to the ninth is going to be I. I to the 10th would be -1. I to the 11th would be -I. I to the 12th would be 1. And it just follows that same pattern over and over again. Now, the reason I show you guys this is it kind of gives you a little idea of how these patterns work, and it'll make a lot more sense when I show you the multiplying complex numbers. what's taking place here. You'll look back at that and you'll say, oh, okay. Now I see why he showed us that to begin with. But look at this example. They've taken, let me adjust the camera here.